Should you optimize in D&D 5e? It's kind of a weird question to ask an optimization channel, but I'll make a video out of it, why not? Welcome to Pack Tactics, where I normally assume you have really difficult days, which is why, well, you look up optimization. But before we begin, this video is sponsored by Dragonheir Silent Gods. It's an open world strategy RPG with a Western fantasy theme and is actually heavily inspired by D&D. How fitting, I'm actually covering D&D right now. Even though it's different from the tabletop RPG, it has a lot of similar stuff like dice rolls, character customization, dungeon crawls, and even characters from Faerun are in the game like Drizzt. It's the Drow Ranger, you know who that is, and much more. After adding Drizzt and Heir 2 to the game, Dragonheir will be launching Phase 2 of the D&D collaboration on February 23rd. Alminster and Samister are going to be in the game, you know who they are. There's going to be a campaign with them. Alminster is probably going to tell you to stop Samister and his cult from creating a Draco Lich. It's classic D&D. And compared to the first phase, the second one provides more loot, better content, and events. So this is the time to optimize. Check out Dragonheir on PC, Mac, Steam, Epic. It's even playable on your phone. That's Android and iOS, by the way. You can play this game at an actual D&D table. Ooh, listen, Gator's not wrong, but you'll probably get in trouble if you do that. But you can absolutely play the game while watching this video, it's okay. Link down below for free download. Let's go into dungeons and kill dragons. Now let's start the video. So first of all, we need to talk about the meta. And then after that, I'll talk about why you should or shouldn't optimize. Tabletop Builds has an article on 3 styles of resource management. These are really important to know. Number 1. Impact maximization. What that is people try to maximize the impact of their resources. For example, a paladin using their smite when critting a skeleton, or a fireball on a horde of zombies, things like that. Number 2, resource conservation. That is when people try to consider if a resource is truly necessary to win a fight, or whether it's more useful later on. An example of that is instead of fireballing the zombies, they might recommend backing up from the zombies and pick them off from range with like Ray of Frost, for example. You're basically kiting. Number 3, progression maximization. This is when people try to get to the cool thing by getting through whatever is not determined to be cool. They keep the game moving by speeding up the game with their resources. Fun fact about this one is really popular with role players getting into optimization. Basically, they optimize combat to end it as quickly as possible so they can get back into the roleplay. It makes sense, they're role players, they want to roleplay. If you give them the possibility to avoid a fight, they will do everything in their power to avoid the fight. If they avoid it, they progress faster, and well, there's more roleplay. Anyways, these 3 styles of resource management, they don't split these up to say one way is wrong and one way is right. It's just there to differentiate. Most of my advice in tabletop builds is aimed at resource conservation and progression maximization, as it maximizes your chances of getting through encounters successfully. That's like many encounters in a row. Long adventuring days, 8 encounter days. Basically, dungeons. As for impact maximization, obviously it can work perfectly fine in most games. You can probably argue it's fine in majority of people's games. That's the 1 encounter or 2 encounter days. Maybe the campaign doesn't even have a dungeon in it. Maybe it's just a one-shot, who knows. Those sorts of games are not nail-biters necessarily, where you need to consider if you can truly expend a resource or not. You just blow all your resources all you want, it doesn't matter. Let me answer the question now. Should you optimize? Well, it depends, but overall in most people's games, you don't really have to do that. I personally believe that you should play whatever you want so long as you're nice to the people you play with and you're a team player in the team game. Optimized or not, you're not a fun person to play with if you're mean to your party members. And you're not fun to play with in the team game if you're literally griefing people. These are real things that happen at people's games, like there are bajillion of D&D horror stories stories about this sort of stuff. You don't want to be a person like that. You should be humble. You might be playing D&D for a whole year. A grand adventure. If you power game being nice to people and a team player, then you can power game D&D and it will be completely fine. Do you know why? Because people like you. You're fun to play with. But let me go back to what I originally said. It depends. Well, yeah, it depends. It might be really smart for you that you build your character to fit the rest of the table. If everyone is playing straight class champion fighters, then maybe a hyper optimized Articron is not the best fit. For those that don't know what an Articron is, it's one of the strongest wizards you can play in the game. If you're playing at an optimized table, like where everyone's playing Articrons, for example, then maybe going straight class champion fighter is not a good idea. But, like I said before, if you're fun to play with and a team player, then maybe the party would be happy with you playing a fighter like that. And you know that game with everyone playing champion fighter? Maybe they will let you play the Articron. All of this is about communication. If you're really good at communicating, you win. If your party's really good at communicating, then you all win. In general, as a baseline, it's important to make a character that doesn't overshadow others. And of course, on the flip side, you shouldn't make a character that is overshadowed by a lot of others. Tabletop Builds has a great article on this. Proposed standards of optimization levels aims to establish standard definitions for build categorization. You can try to fit the builds in these categories, or you can skip the categories altogether and just use the knowledge within and decide if a build fits in a certain party. Here you can see the optimization levels. You have high optimization, mid-high optimization, and then eventually goes to no optimization. You get the point. This is the expected strength of a build. Do not mistake this for the optimizer, by the way. This has nothing to do with the optimizer. It just has to do with builds. Tabletop Builds has a low mid optimization build on their website, and that's not a bad thing. The build has its place at certain tables. If all the builds are not at the same level, that's fine. You can be a few levels away from each other and things will most likely be fine. Especially if you guys are working together as a team. If the team is happy, then, you know, who cares? I could go through all the levels one by one, but that would be too much for this video. I've talked about the flagship builds before, and these fit in high optimization tier. Even the Articron fits in here as well. The no optimization builds are uniquely underpowered characters, and that might be intentional or not. Everything else is in between, as explained in the article. This is not to dissuade certain tiers of builds to be played. A strong build doesn't make for a better character. A weak build doesn't make for a worse character. It's basically all about perspective. I don't make these videos to tell you what to play. I only really share my knowledge about what is strong and what isn't strong. And you can take that information and bring it to certain tables. And that brings me to self-nerfing. Self-nerfing is great. A lot of people do it. I've seen power gamers do it. I've even seen Tabletop Builds members do it. People have different limits to things depending on who you talk to, right? And I'll give you a very obvious example. Maybe you want to play a Shepherd Druid, and we all know what the best spells are and what those strategies are. And if you're playing Shepherd Druid in a martial party, it's really easy to overshadow everyone in the party. And well, you don't want to do that, so you self-nerf yourself. That means you're going to be using worse strategy and spells and all that. But I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. You still have your really good strategy and spells in your back pocket in case shit hits the fan. Or you just pick worse spells. That's not a bad thing either. Like, the Druid spell list is really good. That was just one example, by the way, and it's like the most popular one. If you aren't comfortable doing something like that, well, you might want to consider if you want to stay at the table or not. This is a tough pill to swallow, and I'm not saying that in a negative way or anything. And I'm not saying that you should leave right away. This is just something to consider. Now we're going to move on to flavor. Some people think that roleplay can only be possible without optimization. Or it's something like optimization isn't possible if you want good roleplay. The Stormwind fallacy is akin to this. I, of course, heavily disagree with it. I don't think optimization takes away from roleplay at all. I like to meme about it and pretend it does, but it doesn't. It might give you some ideas to what someone is interested in, but it doesn't take away from their interests in other parts of the game. I'm not sure if any of you watching think this, but really, don't let interest in RP take away from your ability to optimize. If you enjoy both, you can do both. Progression maximization is really popular with role players. I said that before. That's part of optimization. And then of course we get into the flavor is free in the imagination game. But even without flavor being free, you can make incredibly interesting characters based on the predetermined flavor. It might be more challenging, but it can be really fun. I'll give you an example. Flagship Ranger, it's a mess. 5 levels in Ranger, 1 level in Cleric, 4 levels in Fighter, 5 levels in Warlock, 4 levels in Rogue, and 1 level in Sorcerer. How do you justify something like this at an actual table? Well, you start off as a normal Ranger, and then you learn some tricks practicing like a Fighter. Then you got your prayers answered by the deity you worship. And then you sign the pact with an entity from the Shadowfell that might have the same interest as you. Learn some roguish tricks to get better at what you're already good at. And finally, you find out that you have an innate divine boon. And boom, you have a very experienced character who's really good at their job. This is not a typical ranger. This is a ranger that's experienced a lot of different things in their life. And I personally think that's really interesting. They're doing their own thing and it's working out. I want to finish this video by saying, again, play whatever you want. It doesn't have to be optimal or the best of the best. If you and your friends are having fun, that's all that matters. You win. I know that I might seem like a very angry, little scaly chihuahua barking on the internet. But don't let me telling you that your favorite spell sucks dissuade you from using it. If you want to use the spell, use the spell. This is your character, not my character. End of video. I hope I earned your subscription and maybe your support on Patreon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye!